Ayn Rand, R.I.P. by William F. Buckley, National Review Magazine, April 2nd, 1982. Ayn Rand is dead. So incidentally is the philosophy she sought to launch dead. It was, in fact, stillborn. The great public crisis in Ayn Rand's career came, in my judgment, when Whittaker Chambers took her on in December of '57, when her book Atlas Shrugged was dominating the bestseller list. Lecturers were beginning to teach something called Randism. Students started using such terms as mysticism of the mind, meaning religion, or mysticism of the muscle, meaning statism. Whittaker Chambers, whose authority with American conservatives was as high as that of any man then living, wrote in National Review after a lengthy analysis of the essential aridity of Miss Rand's philosophy, quote, "Out of a lifetime of reading, I can recall no other book in which a tone of overriding arrogance so implacably sustained. Its shrillness is without reprieve. Its dogmatism is without appeal." I had met Miss Rand 3 years before that review was published. Her very first words to me, and I do not exaggerate, were, "You are too intelligent to believe in God." The critic Wilfred Sheed once remarked when I told him the story, "Well, that certainly is an icebreaker." It was, and we conversed and did so for 2 or 3 years. I used to send her postcards in liturgical Latin, but levity with Miss Rand was not an effective weapon. And when I published Whittaker Chambers' review, her resentment was so comprehensive that she regularly inquired of all hosts or toastmasters whether she was being invited to a function at which I was also scheduled to appear, because if that was the case, either she would not come, or, if so, only after I had left or before I arrived. I fear that I put the lady through a great deal of choreographical pain. Miss Rand's most memorable personal claim, if you don't count the one about her being the next greatest philosopher after Aristotle, was that since formulating her philosophy of objectivism, she had never experienced any emotion for which she could not fully account. And then one day, a dozen or so years ago, she was at a small dinner, the host of which was Harry Hazlitt, the libertarian economist, the other guest being Ludwig von Mises, the Grand Master of the Austrian School of Anti-Statist Economics. Miss Rand was going on about something or other, at which point Mises told her to be quiet. She was being very foolish. The lady, who could account for all her emotions at that point, burst out into tears and complained, "You're treating me like poor ignorant little Jewish girl." Mr. Hazlitt, attempting to bring serenity to his table, leaned over and said, There, Anne, that's not what Ludwig was suggesting at all." But this attempt at conciliation was ruined when Mrs. jumped up and said, "That is exactly what you are." Both participants were Jewish, and so this was not a racist slur. This story was mortal to her reputation as the lady of total self-control. There were other unpleasantness of professional interest, such as her alienation from her principal apostle Nathaniel Brandon, who was so ungallant as to suggest, in retaliation against her charge that he was trying to swindle her, that the obligatory breakup was the result of a rejection of an amatory advance by Miss Rand. Oh, goodness, that got ugly. There were a few who, like Chambers, caught on early. Atlas Shrugged was published back before the law of obligatory sex scene was passed by both houses of Congress and all 50 state legislatures, so that the volume was considered rather risque in its day. Russell Kirk, challenged to account for Miss Rand's success, if indeed she was merely a exegesis philosophical figure, he replied, "Oh, they read her books for the fornicating bits." Well, that's unkind, and only partly true. The Fountainhead, read in a certain way, is a profound assertion of the integrity of art. What did Miss Rand in her anxiety to theologize her beliefs? She was an eloquent and persuasive anti-statist, and if only she had left it at that. But no, she had to declare that God did not exist, that altruism was despicable, that only self-interest is good and noble. She risked, in fact, giving to capitalism that bad name that its enemies have done so well in giving it, and that's a pity. Miss Rand was a talented woman, devoted to her ideals. She came as a refugee from communism to this country as a young woman and carved out a substantial career. May she rest in peace, and may she experience the demystification of her mind possessed.